kicked off a new sermon series, which began with the question, what if you had absolute, perfect faith and confidence in God? What if you really believed that there was a God who knew your name, who was a personal God, and who heard your personal prayers? I mean, imagine the confidence you would have. Your insecurities would just fall away. Your ability to face temptation would increase. I mean, imagine if everything was going wrong in your life and all you had to do was just breathe a sigh of relief. Because you knew you could say, God, I don't know how you're going to do this, but I know you're working behind the scenes. I know you're in control, and I know everything is going to work out okay. Now, I'm not talking about denial. I'm just talking about real confidence and faith in God. I mean, I've met people with that kind of faith. One of the person, her name was Emma. She made the best Jewish apple cake any Christian should be allowed to make. When Emma was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, she was given 3 months to live, and I went to visit her. And I remember sitting with her in her kitchen, and I just said, Emma, what would you like us to pray for? And I was really convinced she was going to say, I want the cancer to go away. When she sat there, she looked me in the eye, she said, Reverend Bill, I just want to stay in my house. I want to die here. And I don't want to feel any pain. A year later, 3 months, a year later, she died pain-free in her home. And she, every time I visit her, she knew, she goes, I'm going to die in my house. And I'm not going to have pain. It's that kind of faith that was just inspiring. It was also a little bit irritating. It's irritating because I just wish I had that kind of confidence. And of course, I can't focus on my own faults. I can't point out that, oh, I don't have enough faith. So I've got to point out and say, I'm just too smart for that kind of faith. I'm too smart to have blind faith because I know how the world works. I know what's going on, and I know there is no way that you can actually have that kind of simple, childlike faith. But I really wish I did. I know my life would be a lot more peaceful if I did. I really wish I had that kind of big faith in God. Now be honest, have you ever thought that in the back of your mind? I really wish I had that kind of big faith in God. Well, the good news is God wants to grow that kind of big faith in all of us. Because if you have big faith, then if you have a big confidence in God that seeps into every facet of your life, then your life will be different. If you have big faith in God, the way you view relationships will be different. The way you view tragedy will be different. The way you view prosperity will be different. The way you view everything will be different. And there seems to be 5 things that God uses to grow big faith in us. These aren't things that you're going to find in the Bible, and these aren't actually 5 things for you to do. These are 5 things that God does. So here are the 5 things God uses to grow your faith. God uses practical teaching. We're going to talk about that today. God uses providential relationships. Those are the people God brings into your life that helps your faith grow big. God uses personal disciplines. That's the scripture reading, the Bible study, the things that you do on your own. God uses personal ministry. These are the ways that we give back to our church and our community. And God uses pivotal circumstances. Those are those life-changing moments you have that have an impact on our faith in a positive way. Now, through my years of ministry, when I talk to people who I consider to have a big faith, it always seems that these 5 things have played a role in their faith getting so big. That's why we're doing this series. We're doing this series because I don't think it matters where you are in your faith. It doesn't matter that if you're unsure about this whole God thing. It doesn't matter if you are just starting a relationship with God. It doesn't matter if you've been a Christian for 10, 20, or 30 years. All of our faith has room to grow. And God wants to see each of our faith get bigger. So today we're going to explore the first thing that God uses to grow our faith, the practical teaching. So here's something I have learned. When someone tells me their life story of how their faith has grown over the years, one of the things that always seems to show up in their story is something like this. They'll say, you know, I believe in God. I've always believed in God. I grew up going to Sunday school, or I was part of a different religion, and then somebody invited me to a Bible study or to a worship service. And the person that was teaching or preaching didn't just share information. They taught in a practical, applicable way, and then the light bulb went off. And that's the one thing that grows our faith when we're exposed to practical biblical teaching. I'm not talking about just more information. When we realize what we do with what we learn, then our faith grows bigger. I want you to remember this point. You may want to write it down. God doesn't want us to just have more information. God wants us to do something with the information we have. The Christian faith isn't just about learning more. It's about doing something with what we've learned. That's how Jesus taught. He taught for application in a world that taught for knowledge. I want to share an example. It's from Matthew chapter 7. Matthew was one of Jesus' friends. He was one of those original 12 disciples, followed Jesus around everywhere, and eventually wrote down the things he experienced with Jesus. And in Matthew chapter 7, he tells of how Jesus just finishes this sermon that we call the Sermon on the Mount. And it's a message that Jesus gives to the crowd that gathered, not just about what to believe, but about what to do. Jesus taught this way because he understood that simply knowing things doesn't make a difference. What makes a difference is doing something with the information you gain. What makes a difference is putting what you believe into action. And so in this sermon, Jesus is saying, if you really want to have big faith in God, then here's what you should do. If you really want to have big faith in God, here's how you should act. And then he goes on to tell the crowd that is gathered what a big faith looks like. He says, if somebody asks you to go a mile, you should go 2 miles. If somebody really, really offends you, you should forgive them. If someone asks you to do a favor, do more than they ask. If you want to know what to do with your money, just give it away. Pursue people who you have wronged and make it right. Treat everyone the way that you want to be treated. He tells this crowd to do these things. And that was radical teaching for Jesus' culture because he lived in a culture that taught what to believe, what to know. But Jesus taught this is what it looks like to live out a big faith in God. This is what it looks like to believe that there is a God who is a personal God and who knows your name and knows your story. In this Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives us a bunch of stuff to do. Not to gain God's favor, not to get on God's good side, not to get into heaven. Jesus gives us a bunch of stuff to do so that we know what faith in God looks like when we live it out. And then at the end of this sermon, Jesus wraps it all up with this conclusion. It's Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. And Jesus says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Did you catch that first verse, though? Go back to that first verse. Everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them. It doesn't say everyone who hears these words of mine and memorizes them. It doesn't say everyone who hears these words of mine and quotes them. Everyone who hears these words of mine and what? Acts on them. Puts them into practice. Lives them out. In other words, Jesus is saying, if you want there to be a difference in your life, if you want your faith in me to show up in practical ways, if you want God to show up in your life, then you should do these things that I just preached about. Jesus is saying you just can't go away and say, I know God loves me because I just heard Jesus speak. Or I just heard Jesus speak 5 weekends in a row. Or I didn't miss one single speech Jesus ever gave. What do you think about me, God? Why isn't my life better, God? I showed up. But that's how we think. That's how we often rate our faith. We rate it by how often we show up. Or we question God. God, how can you let this happen to me? I went to church. God, how can you let this happen to me? I only missed 2 weeks. Or God, I went for 2 months in a row. Or we bargain with God. If I promise to get back to church, then do X, Y, Z for me, God. But Jesus is telling us, no, that's not the way it works. Jesus is saying, you can come and hear all of my speeches, you can listen to all of my sermons, you can index them, you can catalog them, you can write them in a book and bind it into leather, but if you don't do any of this stuff, it's not going to make any difference. It'll only make a difference when we apply Jesus' teachings to the way we think about our families and our marriages, our education, our future, our morality, our money, our entire lives. When we actually apply Jesus' teaching, this is when God's going to come alive in our lives. Because doing what Jesus says is a demonstration of obedience. And last week, we heard about how our break in our relationship with God was actually a break in trust and obedience. And Jesus is saying this week that if you demonstrate what I'm teaching, then you're living out an act of faith in God. And when our faith intersects with God's faithfulness, when we put feet to our beliefs and begin acting on what Jesus says, God will show up. And believe me, we need to have big faith to get through life. Verse 25 says, the rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. Jesus said the reason the house didn't fall wasn't because they knew the storm was coming. It wasn't because they knew construction or how to build houses. Jesus says the house didn't fall because they knew and did the right thing. They built the house on rock. Putting the words of Jesus into action is building your life on that firm foundation. It's more than just acquiring information. It's doing something with the information you've acquired. I mean, simply stacking up information, simply showing up and listening has no real value. If you want your life to reflect the person who built their house on the solid foundation, then you've got to do the stuff Jesus taught. It's what you do with what you've heard that makes the difference. Attendance doesn't make a difference. Knowledge doesn't make a difference. Obedience makes the difference. Because remember what happens in verses 26 and 27. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When life comes crashing down, and believe me, it does, and it will, your foundation better be more than just showing up. Your foundation needs to be action. Loving God with all that you are, loving your neighbor as yourself, praying for those who persecute you, welcoming the outcast, and any of the other numerous things Jesus taught about. Because Jesus was an incredible teacher. He was an incredible teacher because he gave us more than just things to believe. He showed us what belief looked like. It looks like forgiving others. It looks like going that second mile. It looks like giving generously. If you want your faith to be different, if you want your faith to make a difference, you have to do more than listen. You have to do more than show up. You have to do. And when you do, you are committing an act of faith. That's all it is, even when it doesn't make sense, because you're willing to put your trust in God. And when you have that kind of faith, and it intersects with God's faithfulness, God will come alive in your life in ways